My name is Wayne Byerman. I joined the Air Force because, first of all, I didn't want to get drafted. I liked airplanes, and I wanted to learn something. I didn't know what that something was because it was right after high school, but I just wanted to see what I could learn, spread my wings. I was educated went to tech school for missile guidance and control, and that was any munitions that were launched from an airplane, not dropped, but launched from an aircraft. And we had in the neighborhood of 13 to 15 different kinds of missiles that we learned on. I was stationed in 5 different countries in Southeast Asia: Korea, Thailand, Taiwan, Philippines, and Okinawa. They put me in electronics, something I really didn't want to get into, but that's what they put me in, and I'm glad they did in retrospect. But it took a little bit for me to get over my wanting to be a diesel mechanic and learning electronics. And once I finally broke through that, it worked out very well for me. We typically worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our job was to make sure that the weapon systems were ready and that every aircraft left on time. I found all that exciting, and those were the things that, when I reflect back at it, it was kind of an exciting time. I never felt I was in danger. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun too. I mean, it was enjoyable because you worked as a team. Well, there was 2 times I came back. When I came back from the Pueblo crisis, we were considered we had done something real well. We got presidential unit citation for it. I've got a letter all the way from President Johnson at the time down to me. Got a whole pack of letters, and it's kind of fun to see that. And we were received like heroes. That was good. Right after that, I got orders for Southeast Asia, for Taiwan. Was there for 15 months, and came back in the early 70s, and it was just totally the opposite. Cold reception. People threw food at us. Even in my own community at home, you didn't want to talk about it because it was, I don't know the word to use. I know the military term I'd use, but anyway, it was very cold. People didn't want to talk about it. We lost the war. You name it. We weren't accepted. A lot of veterans would not even say on their applications that they'd been in the military because it was a detriment. So I did not have that problem because I went to school, and so it didn't hurt me at all. But by the time I got out of school, everything was pretty well cooled down. I'm part of the VVA, which is Vietnam Veterans of America. I'm a life member. But I realized that that group wouldn't be on here for a long time because once we pass away, it's going to be gone. So I also joined the American Legion, and it's an ongoing organization. And the reason I like the American Legion is it has people, veterans from all wars, all conflicts, and we all have similar stories. It's just that it's just a different time in history. But we're here to help each other. And I think of the GI Bill that the American Legion helped initiate. And that's why I'm here today. I got a college education through that. So I look at stuff like that and I'm going, I want to be part of that organization to help those that are coming behind me. 2 things is ask a question and listen. Listen and listen. Don't try any antidotes. You know, I did the same thing in civilian life. You don't have any idea because as a veteran, especially for me, I was in some pretty different situations, and there's nothing in civilian life that comes close. But I would say listen and ask leading questions. And when a person doesn't want to say anything, realize that they may have not thought about it before or may not be able to talk about it.
My name is John Michael Lane. I normally just use the middle initial. Mm-hmm. I served in the United States Army. I was a clerk typist. I think that was, I've got it here someplace, I don't have the official designation. I don't remember what it was, but I attained the rank of Specialist E4. I wanted E5, but they didn't have a slot for me where I was at. So the dates of service, I served from 19 January 1966 to 18 January 1968. The government did that for me, and I was of the mind that as long as they wanted me, I volunteered to allow them to draft me. I was not going to volunteer actively, but I didn't run away to Canada either. They assigned that MOS to me because on my resume to join the service, I told them that I had taken 2 years of typing in high school. So they got a free gift. They didn't have to train me to do anything. The downside of that is they assigned me to an acting inspector general / civil affairs officer who was hardly ever in the office. He was a short timer getting ready to exit the service. I spent 2 years active duty, not once putting a piece of paper in the typewriter to actually type anything official. I did put paper in the typewriter to practice my typing skills because I got bored sitting in the office all by myself. To be honest with you, I wanted to be in the motor pool. I wanted to learn a trade. But in all honesty, I have to confess, I never asked to be transferred because I had it made where I was at. And actually, the MIA Hunters is my greatest claim to fame, much more so than what I did in the military. Well, the MIA Hunters is a group that was founded by a man named Brian Moon, former vice president of advertising for Northwest Airlines. After he retired, he always was passionate about war. He was actually born in New Britain or Great Britain, and he remembered as a child being living in a bombed out house in Europe and had very vivid memories of the shellings and the effects of World War II. And he took it upon himself to come up with trying to help families obtain closure he traveled all over the world trying to find evidence of a lost or missing military personnel. He did that largely all by himself for the first 19 years. I met him in 2009. A friend of mine and I, it was a nice warm summer day, and we rode our motorcycles down to Red Wing for an antique military airplane touch and go and old military vehicles and things like that. We were just curious. Well, it was such a hot day that as we were walking around, we got overheated and we're looking for a place to get water. And we passed a hangar and the doors were wide open, and there was this fella sitting in a wheelchair giving a talk about his experiences of all of his travels finding these lost airmen, or any branch of service, really, if they were still missing in action. So he would do the research, and he would visit the other countries and interview people, and he would hire guides to search out locations so that when he got in country, wherever the country happened to be, then it would be an efficient use of his time to go visit the site and verify that that person was there at that site. And he was never on a recovery mission, but just listening to him talk and his passion and sharing his stories from his experiences. Now, at the time I met him, he was recovering from a heart attack. And so he was talking about trying to promote this next mission. And he had this little soldier teddy bear kind of thing that traveled the world with him. It was on every mission that he ever went on, and it used to play a little song. It was one of the Lee Greenwood's songs. Right now, the batteries are done and there's no switch to turn it on. But I inherited it after Brian Moon died in 2015. They thought I was the most logical candidate because I'm such a sucker for stuffed animals anyway. So he was inviting people to join him on this mission, and he was very careful to explain that we'd have to pay all our own expenses and, get vaccinations to go into this foreign country and all of that. And so I went home from that day, and I kept thinking about it. I had joined the Minnesota Patriot Guard in 2008, and as part of those missions, sometimes we would gather at airports and hold a flag line when they would bring the soldiers that were killed in action back from whatever country they came from. One of those missions was a month after I had met Brian Moon. It was in June of 2009, I believe. And Kalina Airlines was bringing 4 bodies back from Iraq. And they brought them into Holman Field. Mm-hmm. And while we were waiting for the plane, there was the accumulation of 4 different families all gathered in the hangar. And they were talking, conversing with each other, sharing their family stories with each other. And the moment the jet landed, there was dead silence in the hangar. You could hear a pin drop. And so the plane taxied up close to the hangar that we were at, and we were standing outside with our flag line set up. And as soon as the cargo door opened on the plane, they moved the first casket into view to offload it. And it was draped with the American flag. And they offloaded it. And of the 4 families, one of the fathers walked up to the casket and checked the dog tags. And the impact that had on me was I understood that at that moment, that was the moment of truth for that father. That was when his son's death became real to him. And that convinced me that I had to do something. And MIA Hunters was the path I chose to do whatever minimal thing I could do to try to help another family come to closure. And closure after so many years after their loved one went missing, I just had to be there. So I did whatever I could do to scrape up the money. I appealed to friends and relatives and to help me pay my way to get over there. The expenses were like $8,500 for each volunteer, plus airfare. The airfare was another $3,000. And on top of that, I had to buy a lot of equipment that I didn't have to get ready for this trip. That doesn't matter. What matters is I did the best I could to make sure that I had the ability to go.
Can you tell us how many of these trips you made?
In Papua New Guinea or...
Just in general with MIA Hunters.
I only made one trip because that was the final trip. After that trip, Brian tried to turn over control of the organization to his son, and his son took it in a totally different direction, tried to get a lot of corporate sponsors, things like that. And it just never really materialized. So right before this trip, Brian took back control, and of course, Brian was with both segments of the trip. I think I said of all the volunteers, they split us into 4 different groups. 2 of those groups left on the 2nd of May from the Twin Cities, and they returned on the 15th of May. The segment I was on was the last half. We left on May 14th and returned on May 27th. So, those are my the greatest impressions, and I feel blessed and privileged that I had the opportunity to do that, partially to make up for the fact that in the military service, I really did nothing.
Hello, I am Jill Stevenson. I am the mother of Corporal Benjamin Kopp, who was an Army Ranger. He served with the 3rd Ranger Battalion at Fort Benning, Georgia, from 2006 until 2009. Yes, Ben was influenced by his great-grandfather, my grandfather, who served in World War II. He was from Minnesota as well, and he served with the 34th Infantry Division Red Bulls. And also, because of the events of 9/11, Ben was 13 when 9/11 happened, and he wanted to avenge the innocent lives that were lost on 9/11. I knew from the time that Ben was a young boy that he was going to join the military, and I knew it would be the Army as well because of my grandfather's service. Ben was my only child who I raised as a single mother, and so my great-grandfather was the strongest male role model that Ben had. Ben idolized him. We spent a lot of time together with him. And as soon as he learned that he served in the military, he started saying that when he grew up, he wanted to join the Army, just like great-grandpa. And he kept up with that until my grandfather passed away. So from the time when Ben was about 7, I had a pretty good idea that he would be joining the military. And then after 9/11 happened, he made a statement as he was watching all the events unfold on television that when he was old enough, he was going to become an Army Ranger, find Osama bin Laden, and make him pay. So everybody that knew Ben from that day forward, including myself, knew that he was the guy that was going to go into the Army right after he graduated. Ben was an Army Ranger, so they don't have a job like you do in the big Army. We'll say like he wasn't a machine repair guy or engine repair guy. I honestly don't think that Rangers have what the military calls an MOS, which I don't even know what that stands for, but I know that it's the job. But Ben was a gun team leader, and he was a rifleman as a Ranger. That was his job. Ben did do 3 deployments. As an Army Ranger, they deployed different than, I'll say, the big Army. And when I say big Army, I mean, any other branch, really. But as a Ranger, he's special operations as well. And generally, 1 year of service is equal to 1 deployment. So by the time Ben was in his 3rd year of service, he was on his way to his 3rd deployment. Because the first 2 deployments were to Iraq, and the 3rd one was Afghanistan. And the one to Afghanistan, he knew, and they were warned, was going to be the worst one that he had seen. And for the guys that were like on his team and kind of in that same, 2 to the 3rd one, going on that 3rd deployment. So he was nervous about it, which made me nervous. But through each of those deployments, and even from when he first left for the military, I turned to my faith. Because I knew that I could very easily go down the rabbit hole of fear and anxiety and just being terrified. And I did that right away when Ben first joined the military. And as I said, with each deployment, my faith just grew deeper. Ben was shot by a sniper during a firefight with the Taliban. He was called forward as a gun team leader to help get to safety a team of snipers and 3 other guys that were pinned down by a Taliban sniper. In the first place, it was the 3 snipers. They they couldn't get to safety because they were being shot at so continuously. One of the Rangers that was pinned down, one of the snipers, said that he felt so close to death that he almost pulled the pin on a grenade because he would rather have died at his own hand than at the hand of the enemy. So the chain of command, for some reason, denied backup for them. So that's why Ben came forward as a gun team leader to save those guys. So in that process, he took a bullet to the leg. He was shot in the leg, in the back of the knee. The popliteal artery is what it was where he was shot, which is secondary to the femoral artery. There are some stories out there very early on where people said that Ben was shot in the femoral artery and bled out. That's absolutely not true. Rangers are medics. Rangers are all trained first responders. So you're literally surrounded by medics, paramedics when you're out with Rangers. They immediately put 2 tourniquets on Ben's legs so they stopped the bleeding. They had to carry him about an hour back to where their forward operating base was. Once they got there, then Ben was put in a helicopter and transported to the nearest hospital. Unfortunately, at that time, in July of 2009, there was a lot of casualties, a lot of injuries, and the hospital that was the main hospital was overloaded. It was full, and so they had to take Ben to a secondary hospital that they had set up. And I have a picture in my mind of something like a MASH hospital. Maybe that's aging me some, but we'll just say it was a military hospital set up rather quickly to just make room to treat the injured that were coming in. So Ben went into that hospital. He underwent surgery to remove the bullet and repair his leg, and that all went fine. That all went fine until he was in recovery. And while he was in recovery, before they had turned down the anesthesia to wake him up, he had a cardiac arrest. He had the cardiac arrest. There was a ranger sitting there with him because Rangers never leave a fallen comrade, including into the hospital. They follow him there and they stay there with him. As soon as that alarm went off that he was having the cardiac arrest, that ranger jumped on his chest and started doing chest compressions until the nurses came in. And then when the nursing staff came in, someone reached for a defibrillator and discovered that it had no batteries in it. So the ranger medic kept up with the chest compressions. And then they discovered that the oxygen tank that Ben was breathing from had a service alarm going off on it, which meant that it needed to be filled, which meant that he was breathing only the equivalent of room air, which you and I are breathing right now. And that's fine for you and I, but it's not enough for a critical patient. Because of that, they had ended up doing a thoracotomy, which is when you make an incision into the rib cage and you reach up and massage the heart through the rib cage. That is how they got Ben breathing again. That is how they revived him and stabilized him that way, from the ranger doing the continuous compressions and then the thoracotomy. So Ben stayed in recovery for a while longer. And then when they went to turn down the anesthesia to wake him up, he didn't respond. And at that point, his brain started to swell. And he was having issues because of that. Again, this was in Afghanistan. They then transported him to Germany, to Landstuhl Army Medical Center there, where he spent about 24 hours. And they felt that they could keep him stable enough by putting him in a medically induced coma to get him back to Walter Reed. Whenever a soldier, a military person is injured overseas, the United States military wants them to get to 2 places, either Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio or Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C. Ben went to Walter Reed. So 4 days after he was shot, he landed at Walter Reed. And at that point, they had informed me that his brain pressures were under control only because he was in a medically induced coma. Those brain pressures happened because his brain was swelling due to the lack of oxygen. So once he got to Walter Reed, the doctors there reassessed his condition. And the day after he arrived, the doctor sat my mother and I down and told us they believed that he was brain dead. And they believed that based on manual testing by poking the palms of his hand, the bottoms of his feet, and shining a light into his pupils and getting no response. They also said that there were legal parameters that required them to do a very specific test to determine that there was, in fact, no blood flowing to his brain. And that test would take several days to be able to administer because it was a very cumbersome piece of equipment that wasn't readily available, and Ben had to be stable in order to do that test. So that bought me time at the hospital with him. He was never conscious the whole time that I was in the hospital with him, but I got to see him and feel him and talk to him, and I believe he heard me. But it wasn't until 4 days after he arrived at the hospital that he was legally declared brain dead, which was 8 days after he was shot. So that is when death came. And so upon his death, his major organs, bone, skin, and tissue, were donated to save and enhance the lives of people he would never meet. That included four people who received his heart, kidneys, and liver. So he directly saved their lives. And then he enhanced the lives of 55 more people with a donation of his bones, skin, and tissue. 3 of those 4 people who received his major organs are still living today, including the woman who received his heart, a gentleman that received his liver, and a young man that received Ben's kidney. I think it's important to remember why we have freedom in this country. To know that freedom has always come at a high cost. And you'll find that cost buried in the ground underneath a sea of white tablets in our national cemeteries. Freedom has never been free. Never been free. And just remember that those men and women that died were family members. They're the sons and the daughters and the sisters and the brothers and the husbands and the wives of your neighbors, of your church community, of the families that are on your kids' sports teams. We're all in communities wherever we live. We've paid the ultimate price for freedom. Our families have. It's important to honor those families by, as I mentioned, being worthy of it, but to know that our freedoms have been paid for. They've been bought and paid for. So when you can go to church, when you can watch a television show that's not censored, when you can speak your mind freely in a college course that's not censored, when you can go to a public place and protest something. There are men and women who died for our rights to do that. In other countries, that's not so much the case. And just to remember, to honor and remember the sacrifices that have been made for us.
All right, Valerie Kennedy, Joseph Allen Kennedy. I'm his mother. He was in the U.S. Army. I have all of his division stuff that I'll give to you later. And he was a specialist at the time of his death. He was deployed out of Fort Knox, Kentucky. His complete dates of service, he entered the Army on April 9th of 2009. And his date of death, he was killed in action in Afghanistan, April 15th, 2011. Actually, out of high school, there was a Marine recruiter that I think was really working the kids over at the high school, and he thought about joining the Marines, and his dad, Jim, talked him out of it by just doing the math with him and saying, oh, you've got a good job right now, and you join the military, and you're going to only get this much. It's about $1 an hour, is that really what you want to do? And so Joe waited and didn't enlist until he was 23 years old. So he was kind of like an old man when he joined the Army. I think his main motivation for joining stemmed back from his childhood. He loved to help kids. He was kind of protective. He's got a younger brother who is 7 years younger than himself, and he was very protective of his little brother. I like to say he's his mentor and his tormentor all at one. But between kind of watching out for his little brother, he thought about going into, community service of some sort, whether that's law enforcement or firefighting or something, and then he got bit again by the military. And he decided to join the Army after he had watched a friend of his, a wrestling buddy, who was injured in Fallujah in 2004. That's Lance Corporal Kyle Anderson from Inver Grove Heights. And he watched Kyle fight for his life, for multiple years. And Joe just had this strong sense of needing to do something bigger than himself. And so he talked to more friends of his, decided he was going to join the Army, and went in with a special, they called it an 18 X-ray contract, because he wanted to go Special Forces. So go big or go home, I guess.
How did you feel when he made his decision?
We were kind of talking about that conversation earlier. I'll never forget the day he told me that he's decided to join. And he knew full well what that entailed, up to and including his life, and he was very willing to do that. And of course, I was concerned right off the bat, and then I thought, okay, if he's going to go Special Forces, that's at least more training, more exact type of missions, those kinds of things. So I felt a little bit better about that. And then that changed for him, through various circumstances that occurred. So he knew what he wanted to do, and he was going to go do it and go make a difference.
What can you tell us about the kind of work he did in the military?
Well, first of all, it started out with the whole Special Forces training, and he absolutely loved it. He went into basic, and he would write letters home saying, it was like summer camp with guns, Mom. This is great. I'll do the gas chamber all over again. He would do all of it all over again. He thought it was fun. He really did. He enjoyed everything that he was getting his hands on and experiencing. So jumping out of airplanes was like the biggest adrenaline rush that he had probably experienced in his life to that day. And his friends all said that you couldn't keep up to him at all on his motorcycle after he had gone through airborne school. So he loved all of that and made it through SFAS, went off to, after he got done at Fort Benning and with basic and AIT, he went to Fort Bragg. And made it through the SFAS, which is the Special Forces Assessment and Selection course. And he was so proud of himself that he had made it through that. It was like 2 weeks in hell or 3 weeks in hell, whatever it is. And it was a group of guys that he'd been in basic with, and they were super excited that they had all made this accomplishment, and they were on their road, right? They were going to get ready to go. So they got into training, and he wound up having an off-base incident. He got himself suspended for a year. During that time, he was assigned to Fort Knox. And when he got to Fort Knox, he was, meshing with his group because they were already in their pre-deployment training cycle. And, they all looked at him like, oh, who is this old guy? And he's bald already, and, the whole thing. But they started doing PT with him, and he was kicking their ass. So he learned, and he got their respect very quickly, and then he just did whatever was asked of him to do. And then over and above that, he loved to tinker with things. So his first sergeant was real particular about his truck. And Joe would get in there, and he had already worked on the river, knew how to tie a bunch of lines and all that sort of thing. So he got in there and organized this truck with all kinds of things that he spliced together for tie downs and the rest of it. And, he loved to keep himself busy with little things like that all the time. So didn't matter what it was, he was staying busy. He truly did love his country and wanted to be something bigger than himself. He felt like when they were in Afghanistan, when he initially landed, I remember one of the first calls home, he says, these people are savages. And I'm like, well, honey, you got to remember, they don't have civilization like we do here in the United States. And he's like, yeah, I know. However, later on, in another phone call, he really had gained a respect for the Afghan people and all of the turmoil that they have lived and survived and, are still living, with. But he just gained an appreciation for the bravery of the Afghan national soldiers and the Afghan people. So I think that was a huge turning point for him in his life. And it would have been really interesting to see how he would have come home and carried that forward into his life.
Was he deployed multiple times?
No, he was deployed once. So this was his first deployment. He landed in Afghanistan in January of 2011, and then he was killed in April. A Gold Star family is a family who has lost a service member in active duty to our country. So it could be either a KIA, it could be an accident, could be illness, or other means of death, as long as they are in active service to the country. So the immediate families, parents, siblings, are all considered Gold Star family members.
And so I would probably like to be Sandy with Masterson in parens and then Lynch, Lynch. So it's Sandy Masterson Lynch. So I served in the Army Reserves. I was a part of the 523rd ASA, and when I left the service, I was an E4, so specialist. And service locations and dates. So I was a reservist. I was attached to the unit out here at Fort Snelling. I did my, basic, and then I had 2 AITs. So I was active duty for training for 14 months. And then I was active reserve for the balance of 3 years and inactive reserve for 3 years from 82 through 88. Connor Gerard Masterson. He was a corporal when he died. He was in the U.S. Army. He was a combat medic, and he died while serving under Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. And that would have been April 8th of 2007. He enlisted February 25th of 2005. Connor was 5th generation military on his dad's side, and then I was also in the military, so I think this was in keeping with some family history. Additionally, he had graduated from high school. He went to 1 semester of college and just really didn't know why he was there or what he was doing. He just wasn't ready. And Connor, for much of his life growing up, was not what I would have called in the mainstream. He was sick a lot, and it took until he was a teenager to figure out that he was simply very allergic to molds, indoor and outdoor. It just kept him out of school, it kept him out of sports, it just really affected his life. And he was healthy at this time and wanted to be a part of something bigger than himself. He just was really looking for, I think, that belonging and a way to give. And he enlisted as a medic, which really fit with his personality because while he was often the one that was sick when he was younger, a part of his personality was always to be reaching out and to be helping others. And this just all came together and worked for him. We were at war at the time, and I was very nervous. For some reason, I just had this feeling that if he enlisted, that he was not going to come home to us again. And I had this conversation with him, and I probably even asked him not to enlist at that time because I just had this feeling. And he told me that it was right for him. It was just the right time and what he was supposed to be doing. And if he didn't come back to us again, that it was something that he understood and was willing to do. So it was hard for me. It was difficult. I was proud for him for wanting to serve, but it was difficult for me to see him enlist at this time. So something that I'd like to say about Connor being a combat medic is that I believe that he achieved more in his short 21 years of life than I have in my entire life at the age I am now. He was a combat medic. He was in the field. He was taking care of injuries that no 21-year-old should have to face. And he did it. He was proud to do it. And I just think it was a very difficult job. Proud of him for doing it. So one is that about 2 weeks before he died, he was able to help, and I just have to put my thoughts together on this. It's been a while since I've thought about it. So just about 2 weeks before Connor died, there was an Afghan soldier who needed a tracheotomy, and Connor was the one to perform his tracheotomy. And my understanding from another soldier that was there was that he left that tent saying, I can go home fulfilled now. I've done what I came here to do. I think it was probably pretty overwhelming for him to have done this and then to have seen this person start to breathe again. And I know he told me about this over the phone. He didn't tell me that same story, but or the same quote that he could go home now. But I remember just hearing the emotion in his voice that he did this. And then he started talking about when he came back, what he wanted to do, and he wanted to go back to school and continue his education in the medical field. So I think that one is a memory that always comes to mind. Okay, so the question was about how I learned and immediate reaction. It was Easter morning, and it was early in the day. I was actually just getting ready to exercise, and our doorbell rang. And I thought, this is so strange, because the doorbell used to ring when our kids were young, but they were all older. And our youngest was about to turn 18, so we weren't used to the doorbell ringing anymore. And it was Easter, so I thought, this is very strange. And I was in the basement, Mike was upstairs, and I could hear the footsteps, and pretty soon he came downstairs, and he said, there are two official-looking military people here to see you. Well, Evan, my youngest son, was interested in joining the military, and we were in the midst of a lot of contact because of that. And he just wasn't thinking about what day it was, and I don't know what he was thinking. He didn't put two and two together like somebody with military experience might. And I just knew. So I ran upstairs. I think I remember taking the stairs two at a time, and yet I never wanted to get there. But something just carried me there. I don't really remember their exact words, but something about confirming that I was the mother of. And I just stopped. My world just stopped. and it was crushing. The only way I've been able to explain it is that it felt like I had just been turned inside out and that all of my nerves were exposed. It was just complete, total, and consuming.
You have a way you describe grief, the grief journey, likening it to having
Yeah.
a child. Can you tell that story?
I can. So I know that I process in my sleep. And I had a dream one night, and I don't need to explain the dream because the details of that probably aren't important. It had to do with being at work and in a meeting and moving between different groups. But when I woke up, I knew immediately what this dream was trying to tell me. And it really is that when a parent loses a child, it is like you have this newborn again, and you have to raise it. So you have to raise grief like you raise a child. And if you do a good job of this, if you're attentive to it while they're very young and you attend to it throughout its life, it raises to become this healthy adult. If you don't, it is going to come back and you're going to be raising it later as an adult. So I saw this as an infant that I had that I had to carry. I couldn't put it down. I couldn't give it away. It was mine. And I had to take care of it. And then one day it sat on my hip. It was a child that you could carry on your hip and was fairly well behaved, but it was with me all the time. And some people would notice my grief and other people wouldn't, but it was with me. And I knew, and this is the point I was at when I had this dream. It was about 15 months in on my journey. And I knew at this point in time that I just had to keep caring for my grief, and that one day it would walk beside me. And that one day it would be like your adult child that would go away for periods of time, but then come back and visit. And that's exactly how it's turned out. I had a dream about 4 years in where my other son and I were with Connor, and we were shopping for a chair. And the chair was for Connor, and it was a crazy lazy boy that he was buying that just fit Connor's personality. And at the end of this, Evan and I were leaving to go back home, and Connor was going someplace else. And when I woke up, I knew it was really time for me to let him sit down for a while, and that it was okay. And, now, fast forward all of these years later, my grief still comes to visit me. It's still, something will happen and it can take me right back to day one or to day, 300, whatever it is. It can take me back in time, and I have to process that grief, and then it will go away again. So I absolutely see, for a parent anyway, I think every kind of grief is different, but for a parent, when you lose a child, you have a new child to raise, and its name is grief. So I am one of 6 children, and most of us have children, and so a large extended family, and our family has always been close. So I think the grief affected everybody, and everybody differently. When I look at our immediate family, there's me and the blended family that I was within, my ex-husband, and the blended family that he was in. So those were, and then Connor's wife, Lorena. And how has it affected us? Wow. It's probably too difficult to say how it affected each of us personally, and I don't think I would want to tell an individual's personal story. But what I would say is that we all had our vision of the future, and that vision included Connor and Lorena and their future children. And with Connor's death, all of that changed. And we all had to rebuild our vision. So we had to deal with our grief. We had to just breathe through and live through that time. And breathing is what I considered my job at the time that Connor died. To live, I had to just keep breathing, and that was so hard. It was the weight on my chest and remembering to take those breaths. That was so very difficult. But you have to make it past all of that or through that, and then you have to build a new future, and every one of us had to do that. We still think of it today. Every once in a while, Evan and I will look at each other and say things like, he would have been such a great uncle. Evan and his wife have 3 children now, and they don't get to have Connor as their uncle, and Connor didn't get to have the joy of being their uncle. We'll remind ourselves of things like this, or we'll be reminded of things like this. So we'll never stop thinking about him. I think of Connor most every day. And I don't know, I'll never stop. It's probably the best I can do on that one. So the first one that I'll mention is that I am a 3M retiree. But when Connor died, I was working at 3M, and a group of us came together to found 3M's Military Support Network. And this group had such a huge impact on me because I was having a difficult time reintegrating back into work, to returning to being that productive employee that I previously was. It was integrating all of this was just really difficult, but having the Military Support Network made all the difference in the world to me. It helped me to grow. So instead of just treading water, I was able to swim again. And to be able to share my experience with other people who cared, and then to be able to pivot that and reach out and help other people who were serving, or to help their families, to turn and make a positive difference in somebody else's life, was really impactful on me. And I think in turn, it was impactful on the people that we were able to reach out to, that we were able to help, we were able to make a difference in their lives. So we were all about making let's see if I can remember the phrase. It was a positive. Do you remember, Tim, the exact phrase? Tell me.
Make a difference, one relationship at a time.
Yes, but there was also another line that had the word positive in it. And it's escaping me right now.
I can see it on the slide.
But I can too.
Yeah,
It's just been too long, I think.
Yeah.
But our motto was to make a difference, one relationship at a time. Yes. And so that was one. Another is that another Gold Star mom and I, Gwen Olson, and a Gold Star sister, Dawn, and I'm forgetting Dawn's last name. Dawn Myers. Yeah, Dawn. It's Dawn, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, for some reason that's sounding wrong. So another Gold Star mom and I, Gwen Olson, and a Gold Star sister, Dawn Myers, created an organization called Scoops for Troops. And perhaps you've already heard about this from Gwen, but Scoops for Troops started out because Gwen and I were, first of all, going through the first year of our journey together. Our sons died 6 days apart. They never knew each other. They served in different military organizations. Daniel was in the Marine Corps. Connor was in the Army. But Gwen and I connected because we met out at the cemetery. Our boys are buried next to each other, just one row apart. And we would talk with each other frequently because we got each other. We were at that same point in that grief cycle, and we could just look at each other and know where the other one was. So as it approached the first anniversary of our boys' deaths, I remember asking Gwen, have you made any plans? Like, what are you going to do to mark this day? Because her day was going to arrive 6 days before mine. And she said, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. And then she called me back just a couple days later and said, I have an idea. And this idea blossomed into us holding an ice cream social at the Ring Mountain Creamery in Egan, where our idea was that we would invite people to say our children's names. I think this was so hard. I think people felt like if they just said Daniel or Connor, that we'd burst into tears and bring bad memories to the surface. Well, the reality was that all of that was at the surface, and we needed to be able to say their names and talk about them and tell stories and have other people remember them. And so we were hosting this gathering. The three of us, it was Dee, she would go by. That's why it was sounding funny. Dee, Gwen, and I hosted this gathering, and we put up pictures of our boys and just invited people to come out. Well, I think it was the Egan newspaper learned about it, and they came out and did an interview and wrote about it. And I think there was something in the Pioneer Press even, and a radio station. And suddenly this was getting a lot of press, and we were worried because we were thinking, oh my gosh, what if more people come than can fit in the parking lot? What are we going to do? And are we going to cause a traffic jam? But the day could not have gone better. At the beginning of it, we suddenly had people giving us things for a silent auction, so we quickly had to put together a silent auction. And we had lines of people all day long coming in to buy ice cream, to make donations. Fortunately, the owner of the ice cream shop, who was a friend of Gwen's, was ahead of the game, and she was ready. She helped us to organize. She had enough ice cream ready. But throughout the day, we raised $4,500. We had no clue that we were even asking for donations. We were just trying to do something to give people permission to talk about our boys. And so we needed to pick an organization to give the money to, and we decided on Tribute to the Troops because they are an organization that had made a positive impact on our lives. And we felt their cause was very worthy in helping wounded veterans and having education funds for children of Minnesota's fallen. So we put all of this together. We made it through the day. It was I remember us at the end of the day looking at each other saying, this is my first happy day in that whole almost a year. And it just happened to both of us at the same time. It was an amazing moment. And then the day was over, and we thought we were done until people started asking us about next year's event. And we went, oh, I guess we're in for another year. Well, we did this for quite a number of years, really up until when COVID hit. So from 2008 would have been our first year until 2020 when COVID hit and really made it impossible for us to continue with that. But we ended up developing this into a large event with a 5K run, 3K walk, ice cream, other food sales, silent auction, and we would raise, I'm having to remember now, but $25,000 in a year that we were able to put into education funds for children of Minnesota's fallen. So For Gold Star families, this became an annual event that many would come to, and it helped us to be together. So it was healing for us. For others, we would have veterans from all different conflicts come through the line and talk to us and tell us stories. And sometimes I think they were willing to share things that maybe they didn't even share with their families because they were in an environment where it was safe and it was healing for them, I think. I think for others, it gave them a cause, a reason to come out and support something military related, which many people were looking for. What's a venue where I can go out and be a part of this? And I think it provided that. There are just so many stories. I think Scoops for Troops gave back in so many ways. I probably have to sit down and make a list of all of these, and I should do that sometime. But there were so many other organizations. I'll try to be quicker about some of it. But early on, there was a grief group that I joined that was, I think, actually started by Veterans Affairs. And there was a very small group of us as moms that would come together. And to be able to talk with other moms and to share our stories made a difference. Oh gosh, there are other veterans organizations that came out to support us. General Mills had one, and just so many. So there are just a lot of different groups that I hate to leave out any important one, but so many. Survivor Outreach Services. Oh gosh, Survivor Outreach Services. I think one of the biggest things that they did was to organize weekend events in the fall where Gold Star families could come out and participate in activities together. Some of it was grief work, some of it was just fun, but having all of the Gold Star family members together, or many of us anyway, another healing opportunity. And I think the last one I'll mention is the, let me think of the name of it, Washington, D.C., TAPS. Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors has played a large role in my life. When we were holding Connor's visitation, the Blue Star moms came and gave us a book. And the book had a lot of poems and writings and things in it, which I glanced at and then set to the side. After Connor's funeral, so you think about 10 days leading up to his funeral, and then having that over with, everybody else went back to their normal lives. And I went back to a void, to this emptiness in our household, and trying to even understand how to step forward, how to do anything. And I was having a particularly low moment, and something took me to that book. And I was paging through it, and a lot of beautiful writings and poems, but I came to the last page, and it had the information for TAPS on it, along with their telephone number. And I called them and said, I need to talk to another mom who has been through this and is surviving. I need to talk to someone. And within an hour, I had a call. And so I was given my TAPS mentor. And she and I think, spent about 3 hours on the telephone. And later that evening, I received a second call from someone else. But it was this one call, was a mom who was 10 years in on her journey. She told me some things I didn't want to hear, like, it will never go away. I mean, I wanted to know that someday I was going to be through this. And she just said, no, you won't. It will never go away. But it changes. And she was living proof to me that I could do this. She was working, she could laugh, she had other relationships, she could do it. And that gave me hope because I couldn't see through this fog. I couldn't see any image where I could make it. And when I hung up the phone, while it wasn't relief, it didn't remove the pain I was in. I knew I could do it. And that was a turning moment for me. And it took me a few years before I made it out to one of the TAPS conferences, but I went out to Washington, D.C. a number of times and joined the TAPS conference. About 2,000 Gold Star family members join, and they hold this every Memorial Day. They have a lot of grief counseling work that happens there, as well as a lot of very emotionally charged moments, like walking the mall together as a group, all of us with our red t-shirts on and standing proud, representing all of our boys and girls, men and women who are no longer with us. It was another organization that made a big difference in my life. Oh, the biggest advice that I think I have for people is that it's okay to not know what to say. Sometimes a hug makes all the difference in the world, or saying our child's names makes a huge difference. If you know the loved one that has passed away, to say their name, to tell stories about them is the biggest gift that you can give to a grieving family member. And I'm sorry is a fine phrase. What I think wasn't helpful were the platitudes, because to me it didn't matter that Connor might be in a better place. He wasn't with me. And it wasn't, for me, that wasn't helpful. For somebody else, maybe I shouldn't speak for everyone. Maybe it would be. But for me, the platitudes didn't help. But the genuine, I'm sorry, was probably it is a fine thing to say. One of the things that was really striking to me at the beginning was that I felt like there would be no more pages in Connor's photo album. And the finality of that is just a physical, representation of the loss, that life ends. What I didn't understand, though, is that other people had stories to share with me that gave me new memories of him. And so sharing those stories, every story is a gift. And then all of the events that we've held or that we've participated in with others continue to build pages in that photo album. So I think others can help that photo album to continue by being a part of that. Okay, so this is Sandy Masterson-Lynch, and we did an earlier interview as a Gold Star parent. And I served in the Army Reserves, active duty, 14 months for training, and then reserve status. And I joined the Army, I think likely because my oldest brother, Jim, served in the military. He was in the Army from 1964. I have to say that over again, because my oldest brother, Jim, served our country in either regular Army, Army Reserves, or National Guard. I think he maybe was even in one other branch. But from 1964 through 2009, I believe it was. And he's my oldest brother, 14 years older than me, and I think he was my role model growing up, and so it was Army all the way. Because I was a reservist, I didn't feel like I was leaving things behind, perhaps quite like others were. I was attached to the 523rd ASA at Fort Snelling at the time, so I knew I was going to be coming back home. I was gone for 14 months, though, so during that time I certainly left my family behind, my parents, my siblings. Yeah, I would say that's... And my work. I was on a leave of absence from 3M while I went to training. I think my most vivid time occurred during basic training. And I think I joined because I was needing to break out of the shell of the environment that I had lived in. I had always looked at my brother Jim, and I always wanted to be a part of what he was doing. And yet, as I was growing up, I had very low self-esteem, low self-confidence, and what I gained in basic training that then I used and leveraged throughout the rest of my training and my entire career is that I gained a confidence. I suddenly learned that I could do things that I thought I was completely incapable of. And I remember graduating from basic training and having our drill sergeants come through and shake our hands one by one. And he looked at me and said, "You understand, you can do anything you want, right?" And I just beamed. So for me, it was that moment of understanding that doors had just opened for me. So my MOS was a 98 Gulf German. So that is a voice intercept operator with German language. So I actually spent 32 weeks, 5 days a week, 6 hours a day learning German at the Defense Language Institute. And then I had 3 months of radio training where what this job is responsible for is listening to foreign voice transmission and then actually writing down what you were hearing to hand off to the analysts. Well, I think I gave one already, which was just receiving this incredible feedback from our drill sergeant. Now, I have to say that I was 22 when I went into the military, so I was a little older than most of the others that I was with in our platoon. And I think this gave me the opportunity to be a leader, and I didn't really even understand I had that inside of me. So I had that opportunity. I think that growth during that time was one incredible experience. So a lot of this for me is my personal journey in gaining that confidence, and the military really gave that to me. Another is that when I entered basic training, so we'll go right back to that, I could not do a single male push-up. And I could run, but not so well. But when I graduated, I maxed our PT test. And I kept that with me through not only the rest of my enlistment, but the rest of my life. And while I can't push out 40 great push-ups today, I know that the military taught me all about discipline and structure, and I just have used that throughout my whole entire life. So I don't know that there's much more than that, but it really is a personal growth journey. So not only was I a veteran, but I married someone in the service, and we moved to Germany on his enlistment. So I actually pulled some of my reserve time with his unit, which would never happen today, but this was definitely a different time. Different place. And moving overseas, and in this case, I'll say being a dependent wife, was difficult because there weren't, I was used to being, and I know I'm going off script here of being a veteran, but being a dependent wife was the most difficult thing. I was used to being a part of everything, and suddenly being the dependent wife was very difficult. If I think back to my own time, the most difficult, I can't even think of anything, because for me, it was enlightening. The whole thing was just growth. My experience was outside of a time at which we're at war. It was during peace. And so I can't liken my experience to anybody who served recently. I mean, anybody who has served in any of our conflicts, I take my hat off to. I have so much respect for them, and I don't ever try to pretend that my service is like their service. But what I saw happen for me is that it changed the whole trajectory of my life. And I ended up retiring, having managed several IT organizations that spanned countries around the world. And never, when I was 22 and I enlisted, never would I have thought I would have been capable of doing that. And it is absolutely the time that I spent, my 14 months active duty for training. It is that time that was so transformative to me and set me up to be successful later in life. And so I think we talked to this. My life after the service, I went back to school, I earned a college degree, and I applied that degree at work, and I had opportunities to do things I never thought I was capable of. I was able to travel around the world for work. I managed teams. I did things that I never had envisioned for myself. Yes, and it might sound like a bit of a cliche, but for me, the word is freedom. And part of that is because when you enlist, you give away some of your freedoms. And that moment when you realize that your life is different and you have pride that comes with serving, but you give up something that others take for granted. Because I was pondering this question, thinking I'm not sure where I would tell people to go, other than seeking out events that are military related and being a part of those. But to really make a difference, connecting with Beyond the Yellow Ribbon organizations and understanding how you could either be a part of events or volunteer or make a difference in someone's life, for a veteran, I think this is an excellent way to do it.
So I'm Robert Timothy McElroy, and I go by Tim as my middle name. I served in the United States Air Force active duty from 1978 until 1998. And when I left the Air Force, I was assigned to the 20th Air Force, which was based out of F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And I retired as an E8, and in the Air Force, that is a senior master sergeant. My service locations, my primary service locations, were just at Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota. And then we served over in the United Kingdom at RAF Mildenhall. And from there, we transitioned to F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne. I had many temporary duties, I guess you could call them. None of them were deployments to any combat locations, but I had a lot of different other locations that I was at. So I entered the United States Air Force, and it's interesting because I had a maternal grandfather who served in World War I in the Army. I had my own father who served in the Army in the 82nd Airborne. So he liked to jump out of planes. He had a great story. He truly never landed in an aircraft until he was almost 50 years old, right? So you'd think Army's the direction that I wanted to go to. I also had an uncle who was my godfather who served in the Army. He was a Vietnam veteran. But I was working 3 jobs. I was married very young, had a child on the way, and I worked at the Target store in Roseville, Minnesota, which was T1, the very first Target store ever. And I was a maintenance person. And lo and behold, my supervisor, who oversaw the maintenance department, just got out of the United States Air Force. And so he sort of became my recruiter. And but that's in essence why I chose the Air Force. He knew I wanted to continue to go to school because I was also going to school. And he actually steered me into my Air Force specialty code, that's what we call it, so that I would have more time to actually go to school. So Kurt, I owe him a lot as far as why I chose the United States Air Force. I left behind, my parents, obviously, and I had, at the time, only 5 siblings. Mom and Dad decided to have another child. We're 23 years apart, so I didn't know him yet. But I also left behind my wife, a pregnant wife. And so I went off to basic training down in Lackland Air Force Base. I think what was really important for me is the fact that because I got to travel a lot to these various duty locations, I got to experience different areas, parts of the world, and also parts of our own country. So I would say definitely I enjoyed them all. There was never one favorite, and there was definitely one that was never not my favorite. I would say the most difficult for me was probably leaving my family, right? Leaving the kids. And again, not that I was going off to combat, but they were lengthy, temporary duties. One of the things that the Air Force did for me is it showed me that I'm capable, right? I just kind of muddled through high school and knew that I had to go off to college or whatever. But what the Air Force taught me was you could put some rigor behind your life, and it really helps, to create your character, right? And so did I know that it was actually going to prepare me for my career even after the military, with working at 3M. But the thing that I was most proud of was the teams that I was able to work with or even create. Just some wonderful people. Because again, I mentioned earlier that Tim didn't necessarily have an aptitude for maintaining aircraft. I didn't have an aptitude for a lot of things. But what I was able to do and learn how to do because of the military is create some really dynamic teams with some wonderful people who were accomplished in certain aspects of what we needed to do. It was really important. Yeah. I would say the word that has changed or has never changed or that I've learned to appreciate more and more is patriotism. And just because that means so much to, many people. But for me, it's just the true freedoms that we get to experience every single day in our country. It's, people, will do anything to try to get into the United States of America, right? And there's a reason for that. It's because of the freedoms that we do have and that we do get to cherish. And there is not a day that goes by that I don't thank the good Lord for the ability to live in this country. And why was I chose to, be able to serve, do a full complement of service to our country, and lead the life that I do. So just patriotism, I would say. One of the things that we did with the 3M Military Support Network is there's a long-standing tradition in the military that specific units or organizations would have, and it was called what they referred to as a challenge coin. So a challenge coin was something that if it was given to you, and typically it was awarded to you as maybe a junior member in the service organization by commander or somebody in command. And they would provide you with this challenge coin as a significant, because of a significant event that maybe you participated in, or just something that they wanted to thank you with. So you would receive this challenge coin. And so the idea, though, was its root was you would carry your challenge coin whenever you went anywhere, but primarily when you went into either the officers club or the NCO club or the soldiers or airmen's club or whatever it might be. And you had to present your challenge coin. And if you didn't have your challenge coin with you, then you would owe everybody within that area a drink, right? That's where it started. So one of the things that we did at 3M is we had a number of people who were highly supportive of the Military Support Network. I'll even say the Military Support Network couldn't even be designated initially as an official employee resource group. And, there was a lot of commentary about, well, it's supporting war or whatever the case may be. But once we convinced people that it was much more than, supporting war, people really welcomed the idea of the creation of it as an employee resource group. So what we wanted to do, though, is we wanted to offer a challenge coin to those individuals. Maybe they were new members who joined the support network. It was somebody who supported the network. But the important thing about our challenge coin and what you do is the creation and the design of it, right? So our challenge coin really depicts first and foremost the family, right? Because that's what we were focusing on. So on the coin itself is, some imagery, thank you, of a military family. But the other thing that we wanted to do is show that we have a company that supports that. So you also see as part of that imagery an office building, right? And I know we had 3 stars with a chevron, and now I can't remember exactly what that depicted. If it was the service member, the family, and those that support, something along those lines.
Yeah, we actually had the duty, honor, what was the third word we put in there? Courage, I think it was. And
yes.
Then we had, so it could represent multiple things. The other one was the family, the service, the employment.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it's always a poignant reminder of the ultimate sacrifice, right? And why we existed as a support network to help those who may have suffered that loss. And we had a specific group, a bereavement group, who would honor those who were killed in action and recognize them. I know that Sandy and I attended, unfortunately, many funerals during that period of time, but it was important, right? I mean, people needed to understand that there were others in your community who you've never met before who really cared and wanted to show their respect and honor their loved one who was killed during their service.
Amy Nordquist, United States Air Force. My rank is Lieutenant Colonel. Dates of service, February 2002 to currently still serving. So I entered the United States Air Force Prior to joining the United States Air Force, I did meet with a recruiter from another branch, and my heart just wasn't settled with that branch. So I was introduced to a great recruiter through the Minnesota Air National Guard. He did take his time with me. He answered all of my questions. He said I was one of his most challenging troops just because I had a lot of questions for him. So I thought I was going to choose the shortest job, which was 6 weeks of schooling, and I ended up choosing one of the longest AFSCs for training. So when I left for basic, what I left behind were my summer activities and my family, who I was very close to. I was still living with my parents and my brother. I was a water ski on the Twin City River Rats. So when I got basic training dates, of course, that ended up being over the summer. So it was hard to leave that behind, especially my family too at that time. I have a few great memories of basic training. One memory is right off the bat, before the training instructors came to meet us. I met a friend, her name is Becca, and we both had the same watch. My concern with that watch is I didn't know how to turn off the alarm on that watch, and I didn't want to go to basic training with the alarm on. So Becca at that time was able to turn the alarm off on my watch, and that was just the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Becca is a believer. We grew super close during basic training. And even years after basic training, there was a time I think we came down to we didn't see each other for 14 years, and the Twin City River Rats ended up going to nationals in Indiana, which was only 45 minutes from her home. And it was so cool because these past 2 years she's been able to come to nationals with her family, and we just pick up where we left off. It's just a beautiful friendship that was just meant from the same watch. The friend that I was talking about, Becca, she was great to guide me into my relationship with my husband later on down the road. So during basic training, I remember getting the letters from home, getting letters from Andy specifically, my husband now. But the cool thing that he did is he made me feel like I was still at home taking part in the River Rats. So he would send me programs and pictures, and I just felt like I was still a part of what was going on at home. We were just friends then, but I still remember the day he sent me, I opened my mail, I saw the program for the River Rats, and I just wanted to shout and share it with everyone, which I kind of did. It was a lot of fun. So it was just that those special letters is what brought Andy and I together. And later on got married down the road. When I joined, I was an Aerovac medical technician for about 8 or 9 years. And my job was to provide care on your transport aircrafts, your cargo planes, C-17, KC-135, C-130. So we would provide care to our troops that were injured, and our job was to get them to further definitive care. And currently, my job is I'm a clinical nurse with the medical group, and I get to oversee the en route patient staging system. So we actually get to stage the patients prior to them being flown to further definitive care. I would say the hardest part, just it makes me smile now, is just going off to basic and being yelled at for smiling. Right? That's all a part of the game, breaking you down and bringing you back up. That was a hard adaptation. When my family came to watch me graduate, they had to tell me that it was okay to smile. Other than that, I can't remember any specific hurdles, but I always feel like the resources, the people that are put into your life, make it easier. And, early on, I was taught, we had to go through all of this training. We found out that it wasn't just the C-130. We were now going to be qualified worldwide on the aircrafts out there to transport patients. And I must have felt overwhelmed at that time. And I had an incredible leader up front, Joella and Eva Volt, that caught me in the crowd. I rolled my eyes, and she said, she goes, "Yes, Amy, we are all in this together." So I truly believe no matter what the hurdle is, you have people around you that have been through it, and you have to know how to reach out, especially if you're having difficulty, to ask for help. So that's my hope, that I can pass that on to my troops. I would say the biggest thing right now for me to be able to continue to serve is you have leaders that support that family life balance. It's definitely something, if I don't have that balance between civilian life, military life, home life, it just makes it very challenging at home. The neat thing is just seeing how the kids do carry a lot of pride in the military. They know that it's a Hercules flying over, and they get super excited to go to the different events out at base. That's what I take pride in now, is watching the excitement in their eyes as I serve. So I would say the biggest thing is not so much having to support me. It's more so supporting my family. So, anytime that I have to leave, whether it's a week, 2 weeks, a weekend, 6 months, knowing that my family's taken care of and people are pouring into my family is the most important piece for me at this stage of life.
I joined the Army, enlisted in 1967. I went through basic training at Fort Campbell. From there, I went to OCS, and from OCS I went to flight school, and I served 26 years. I was a second lieutenant in Vietnam in 1969 at Cu Chi. I was a Cobra gunship pilot, so my job was to go to firefights every day, gunfights, and get shot at. So I was shot at probably 10,000 times. Every day come home with 20 to 30 bullet holes in the aircraft, and I was shot down 3 times. One time shot down in Cambodia during the invasion of Cambodia, and we were about 30 seconds from being captured when the aircraft came in to pick us up. So we were in gunfight, and my co-pilot didn't have a rifle. I brought my rifle with me that day, and so I'm in the tree line taking out NVA coming for us, and I think I killed about 10 of them out of the 20 or so coming towards us, and then the rescue bird came in and pulled us out of there like within seconds of being captured. So then I really liked flying, so I went back to the States and I saw what was on the TV, and I called Department of the Army. I said, "Get me the hell out of America." So they sent me to Germany. So I went to Germany. I was flying in Germany, helicopters, and I stayed for 3 years. And then I went back after that tour, and my wife still didn't want to be married to a Vietnam veteran, so I gave her a divorce, and I was single for a few years, and then I went home for a high school reunion and ran into Barb, who we had been best friends in high school, and so we got together and started dating. I was then based at Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon, and so we got married, and then I asked for another assignment to Germany, so I took Barb to Germany, and we had a tour in Germany together, flying. And then I was ready to come out of Germany, and they had sent me to be an Apache helicopter pilot, and so I went back to Germany as an Apache squadron commander, and then we deployed to Desert Storm, and I had been a night operations guy in Vietnam, and so the Apache is a night fighter, and so I was natural at that. So the Corps commander learned of me, and he had known my call sign from Vietnam. So he said, "You're my guy, Branham. You're going to lead the first attack into Iraq and Desert Storm." And so I said, "Oh, that sounds good." So we're training up for Desert Storm, and I go, "Okay, guys, we're going to be the first attack into Iraq." And my captains came to me and they said, "Sir, nobody in the unit's ever been shot at except for you." I said, "Okay, I'll lead every attack." So I was the first aircraft. So I led the attack into Iraq, and we went up against 100 tanks on the first attack. And in about 17 minutes, we had 45 tanks burning. So that was successful. Went back during the daytime, and we encountered another 100 tanks, and we did the same thing with them in about the same amount of time. So then I was ready to leave that assignment because that war was over, and I had been in command for 2 years. So they said, "So Branham, you're going to go lead the drug war in South America, Central and South America." So I said, "Okay, I hate drugs, so that sounds good." So I went to Cocoa Beach, Florida, which is where we were based, and I had 50 helicopters in Peru, Bolivia, Guatemala, and Belize, and we would do night flights to take down drug cartel aircraft, and we would average 3 to 4 busts a week, and an average bust taking down a helicopter would be $20 million in cocaine and $50,000 to $100,000 in cash. And so I did that for 2.5 years. And the FBI, after a few months, the FBI called me and they said, "Sir, I have to let you know that there's a hit out on you. There's a $10,000 hit on your head and a $10,000 hit on your wife." I said, "Well, they know I'm a combat vet. You better let them know. I'm not going to go quietly." So nobody ever tried to take us out. We just continued to go rollerblading during the day, and I always had a gun in my belt under my shirt, and we never had any problems, so nobody ever tried to do anything. And then I finished that tour, and I got asked to go back to the Pentagon and do worldwide inspections because I had become a nuclear weapons expert when I was in Germany on a tour. Because when you're there, aviation wasn't a branch, so you had to have another branch. So I was a field artillery guy, and my field artillery units were always nuclear capable units. So I was a nuclear weapons expert. So they said, we need somebody to go lead the nuclear weapons training school in Germany. So we'd like you to go do that. So my wife and I moved down to Oberammergau, which is by Garmisch in the Alps. I did that for a couple of years, and then we went back to the Pentagon, and I did worldwide inspections of nuclear-capable units for another 3 years. And then my wife said, our daughters, we had both had 18-year-old daughters, and her daughter was going to graduate from high school, and she said, "I want to go home. I want to be there for my daughter's graduation." So she said, "I'm going home. I hope you go with me." And I says, "I'm ready." So we retired and came back to Minnesota, and have had a happy life here for the past 25 years, and left all that other stuff behind. My family, there were 7 kids in the family. I had a brother and 5 sisters. My dad lost his leg in World War II a week before he turned 18 years old. He was an anti-aircraft gunner on a ship, and the Japanese aircraft were attacking his ship, and they shot his left leg off above the knee. So he had a wooden leg all his life, 75-pound wooden leg. But he was a great mentor and encouraged me to go fly and join the Army, and so, yeah. So none of my jobs were easy, as I've described. It was always danger, but my dad had prepared me for that as a young boy. One thing my dad did, he taught my brother and I how to shoot a rifle when we were teenagers, and then my dad would send us into the woods. He'd say, here, take the .22 and go out in the woods, and don't come back until you have something for dinner. So I'd go off in the woods until I found a bunny or something, to bring home for dinner, and he'd show me how to clean it. And so that kind of a mentorship. And then he never wanted me to be afraid of the dark. So there was a woods outside our area that was about a mile long. He said, I want you to go through the woods tonight by yourself with no flash. You can take a flashlight if you run into trouble, but don't use it. Otherwise, the trail. So I'll meet you at the other side of the woods, in a half an hour or so, or hour, however long it takes you, and I'll be there. And so he sent me off into the woods, and he would do that kind of thing with me all the time, always challenging me to be outside my comfort zone and get reliant and courageous. So it was very difficult at first because of the Vietnam stigma, and I had a lot of resentment towards people that did not accept me. So it took me a while for a long time I didn't tell people. I just said I was in the Army. I didn't tell them what I did or where I was, and that I was in Vietnam. I didn't even talk about Vietnam until years later, when veteran organizations learned of me and saw my career and said, we need you to come talk. And so that's what got me talking then to groups of people about my career. And so, and it was always positive feedback. So it turned my whole idea around, okay, these are my people, and I can talk to them about what I did, and they're not turned off by, they don't reject me. And so my primary friends are former military, or I have some civilian friends, but if they don't accept me, I don't need you as a friend either. I truly treasure the camaraderie. There's nothing better than military buddies, people that you've been to war with. My Vietnam friends and I, we still get together every couple of years, and they're some of my closest friends that I love more than, as much as I love my family. They're part of my family. So I'm a strong believer in being a member of the VFW and the Legion, and I belong to both in Lakeville, and I would go to the meetings and participate and go. The story was my dad, because of the loss of his leg, and he was in a wheelchair a good part of the time, and we were in a house and we needed a ramp, and a ramp was like $10,000, and by the time he was in an advanced age where he needed a ramp, and my brother and I wanted to pay for it, and he wouldn't let us. So it spurred my brother and I to learn how to build ramps. And so it started out, my brother and I, back in probably 1980, we started a little group, and then I went to my VFW and I said, I'm starting this group to build ramps for disabled vets. And I'm talking to county service officers around the area, the 7 counties around the area, and asking, who needs a ramp. And I said, I think I'm going to need money for materials and tools. And so the Lakeville VFW said, whatever you need. So they've funded, so they use all the Poppy money goes for the ramp team. And we've built over 200 ramps in 20 years now in the entire 7-county metro area. We go as far as Anoka, as far down south to Faribault, and been everywhere building ramps for vets. And it's just a passion, and I've got 10 to 12 guys on the team. And every time we have a ramp build, all 10, 12 guys are there, and we have a great time, great camaraderie, and it's a really nice group of friends.
Yeah. Is there a name of that organization? Or?
It's the Lakeville VFW Ramp Team.
Oh.
I'm a big believer in the Legion and the VFW because it's so healing for veterans. So if you're a veteran, belong to those organizations, participate in the meetings, meet the other veterans there. It'll pay you benefits you won't even believe, because you'll be accepted for who you are and what you did, and people want to know what you did, and so it'll be reassuring to you. So please join those organizations. And if you're so moved, join the ramp team and come hang out with a bunch of guys that want to go take care of other vets. That I say, step out and do what your passion leads you to go do, and don't worry about the outcome, because you're going to be paid back tenfold in your self-esteem, your self-respect, your abilities, the things you're going to learn about yourself that you can do or can't do, and you're going to learn to have a level of courage that, will be unparalleled, that you've never witnessed before. So step out of your comfort zone and get involved with organizations that are serving other people.
Okay, Lisa Wheeler. I was solely when I was in the service. So I was in the Army. I was active duty for 3 years, and then I was in the reserves for 8. Division. I was in, the latest was the 785th combat stress. Medical. Yeah, medical. And then I got out as a captain. Well, I joined out of high school, which would have been 86, and I lived in Germany for 3 years. So I got off of active duty in 89. Actually, I was living in Germany, and I came home right before the wall came down. So that was one way to remember that. But then I went to college, and I rejoined because I missed it in 90. Do you remember when I came? Because he was already in the unit. It was probably like 90, 89, 93, I think, 93. And that was at Fort Snelling here in Minnesota, joining the reserves as an occupational therapist on that one. So that's when I'd finished college. So when I was in high school, I actually was in the junior ROTC, but it was Air Force. And I actually did not like the commander. And so I decided not to join the Air Force, which is probably the wrong reason not to join the Air Force. So my best friend and I talked it over, and we didn't want to go in the Navy or the Marines, so we decided on the Army. Oh gosh, I was so young. I was actually 17 when I joined, 18 by the time I moved to Germany. So really it was just a younger sister and my mom, yeah. Well, when you say training, basic training comes to mind. And there was a lot of yelling. I'm not sure exactly what I can share, but I can tell you that Drill Sergeant Blennis was a female. And this is when it was separated, so we were all male or all female, so it was all female. And when we were doing push-ups, if anybody went down on their knees, she would get in our faces and yell that force get on their knees. And that has stuck with me. Isn't that awful? But yeah, today I don't do push-ups on my knees.
What can you tell us about the kind of work you did?
Well, active duty, I was in the signal, and that just kind of all blended together. But then in the reserves, we were a mental health unit. And so we did do a lot more of mental health type missions, especially when we were deployed. You know, a lot of soldiers, they would come to us when they had issues. And so that was a lot of what we did. And so that was pretty rewarding. I think I jump immediately to deployment, you know.
You haven't mentioned if you were in Iraq.
Yeah. And we had just little teams of 4. So there were 4 of us on the mental health team there. But I happened to be over in a place called Ramadi, and it was kind of near Fallujah, so a lot of Marines. And the Marines ended up taking over the base where we were after a while, but we did the bad guys kind of got lucky, and we did have some missiles and bombs come into the base, and the Seabees were new there, and they were right next to us, and for whatever reason they had gathered outside, which is against the not what you should do. And unfortunately they got hit, and there were some casualties, and it was just that was awful. That was one of the biggest things that happened there. Otherwise, one not quite so stressful was combat flying in an Apache. Oh, talk about being like on a roller coaster. And I got to do that a number of times, which we never got fired on, which was good, but that was kind of an adventure there. So there were some cowboy pilots out there. Yeah. I mean, I have to go back to, I think, active duty on that one, and really, well, I suppose we could even go to when we were deployed, because I think the interesting thing there is, you know, you kind of get used to some of the incoming, as weird as it sounds, the incoming, the firefights that you can hear, and some of that kind of stuff. And so I think you just kind of prepare yourself for that, and then you live in that sort of prepared state. But, we would get up and we would do, we'd have people, some of the soldiers that were having issues, some of them would come and stay with us when I was working in Anaconda, when the team was in Anaconda. And so we would have different groups, to have them help manage their stress and some of that sort of stuff. Lunch was always a high point, and I guess, I don't know, I guess maybe the day-to-day was actually a little bit of adjusting to whatever came. So that was always interesting. And I say that because, we, Jeff and I happened to be engaged by that point, but we couldn't stay at the same place because we weren't married yet. And about 10 months in or so, they told us we could both go on leave at the same time, so which was kind of exciting, and we were looking forward to it. And then when we got home, we couldn't wait to go back, which was really weird. So, it was just, I guess, I don't know, I guess the normal was just adjusting to whatever was happening at the time for the deployment piece. Really active duty, not during wartime. It was just like anything else. You get up and go to work and, do your thing.
What was the hardest part of the military lifestyle for you to adapt to?
Boy, that's... I mean, for my personality, I'm, a little OCD, got some tendencies there. So, it was easy to get up and put your uniform on because that's what you had to choose from. I mean, this is what your choices were to eat, so some of that was easy. I almost think when it came to not having to do that anymore was almost harder. So if that kind of makes sense, whether it was, so active duty, obviously that was the case, but if you had a day off or almost kind of trying to decide what to do with your time, or when we came home from being deployed. I know a lot of us talked about how, you'd look in the fridge and you'd be like, I don't even know what to pick here. And you close it and, go sit down again. There's too many choices. So it can be a little bit opposite of what you're asking me. But yeah.
Interesting.
Honestly, I think after a time, I guess it depends on a person's experience or maybe even how long you'd been in or that sort of thing. But stepping away from it is difficult, So, yeah, after active duty, I was ready to be done with active duty. But then even after just a short time, I thought, I really miss the camaraderie and just the overall military thing. So I went back in the reserves and then stayed for 8 years and actually got out because we decided to start a family. So, we had seen the mom and dad deployment thing and didn't want to have to do that if we had a child. So that's what got me out. Otherwise, I probably would have stayed in too. But yeah. Well, let's see. We came home in 2005 from our deployment. We got married that year. So it was in 2006 because I had to, as a captain, I had to resign my commission and then they had to accept it. I want to say August of 2006. And to be honest, I was like, I got it. And I was like, all right, I know I asked for it, but they could have fought for me a little bit. But yeah, it was definitely a time of transition. So yeah, so I've been out for a little while.
And how did your life change after service?
Oy. Well, I never ran again. I don't know. I kept all of my stuff in duffel bags down in the basement for years, didn't I? Yeah. Well, I got rid of quite a bit of it. And that was actually really emotional. I cried as I peeled name tags off and stuff, But otherwise, it does open up a whole different, you have more time. You don't really have to focus a lot on the next drill coming up and what is the plan and some of that. So I guess that's really it. And then, for us, unfortunately, there was a fertility issues, but we finally had a child. And so that obviously took up a lot more time too. And that was most definitely worth it. I think as the state of the world today is a little bit tricky, especially now I have a son, right, who's going to have to do the selective service eventually and all that. He has said he doesn't want to join, and I can understand that. Probably at 13 I didn't want to either. But I do think our sense of, I'm going to call it patriotism these days, is a little bit skewed. It's kind of become a dirty word, and that's unfortunate, and hopefully we can get back to just more the supporting of the American way of life without it being looked down upon. Does that kind of make sense? You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's probably the biggest thing. Hopefully that will change and we can get back to being proud without it being exclusive. I don't know what the right wording is, but yeah.
My name is Mike Lotzer. My branch of service was U.S. Army. The most recent division was 34th Infantry. My last rank was captain. Well, I served in Basra, Iraq from 2009 to 2010 for a 13-month tour. I served stateside in Pasadena, California for a couple of years, in the California Army National Guard, in South Carolina, Fort Jackson, Fort Knox, Kentucky, Fort Lewis, Washington, and Brooke Army Medical Center in Texas. And the dates of service was 2004 to 2012 was my time in service. The U.S. Army, not particularly by choice. I just happened to be brought to a recruiter with a friend of mine. We were accepted into Fuller Seminary in Pasadena, California. which was going to be rather expensive. And my friend Ryan's dad suggested we talk to a recruiter about the military paying for our seminary, and we should think about becoming chaplains in the military. And so the Army recruiter happened to be the one in.
Who or what did you leave behind when you went to serve?
When I deployed to Iraq, I left behind my wife, Erica, and we had been separated in training schools prior to that and on some assignments. And so she was very patient with me. But we didn't have children at the time, which made those years of separation much easier than some. In 2008, I believe, or 9, I went to Brooke Army Medical Center for a course called Combat Medical Ministry. And young chaplains were taught how to minister to people who are dying by serving in the level 1 trauma emergency room at the hospital. And so we would learn how to take a knee and comfort people who were experiencing gunshot wounds or who had been run over by a vehicle or who had experienced an amputation in a traumatic way. And so that training school was probably the most unique experience. Not something I would have ever thought I would do, but helped me be a better chaplain in combat for sure. As a young chaplain in the military, the work varied considerably. There was a season where I did a lot of strong bonds marriage facilitating, where I would facilitate retreats for couples on active duty and teach them how to communicate better and express forgiveness and work through marital problems and reintegrate into their marriage after deployments. And that was a learning curve because I hadn't been married very long and didn't know much. But my ignorance was a blessing in some ways because I would pass the microphone around to couples and get their thoughts, and it created a good group dynamic. There was another season where I did a lot of death notifications as a notification chaplain. That was a very heavy, grief-filled season where I would knock on doors and of families who would be known as Gold Star families with a notification officer. And that was very hard, and did a lot of funerals and a lot of grief counseling, which was rare for a young officer in his 20s to encounter that much death. But then being a chaplain in combat was unique as well, and got to start a coffee house called Holy Joe's Coffee and minister to all the different branches in Iraq and fly to little fire bases and do services for people on big bases and little bases, all sorts of varied assignments.
What are one or two of your most memorable experiences during your service? Well,
probably besides the casualty notification tour of duty, which will always stick with me, and I've remembered those vividly, of course, just as someone who sees those two uniformed officers at their door will never forget that. The most vivid memories in combat were being a part of a rocket attack in Basra, Iraq in 2009. I was teaching a financial peace university course at the time for a number of soldiers at a division headquarters in a secure kind of half underground facility, and we had rocket fire incoming on the base, which wasn't abnormal, but then a Lieutenant Aaron Towner, in the course had a radio and said that they were calling for a chaplain, and I was the closest one, but the all clear was not given, and so we had to make the decision to travel through the rocket attack or not. But they did report there was one casualty and 2 severely wounded soldiers, and they were requesting a chaplain. And really, to Aaron Towner's credit, he looked at me and he said, "Let's do it." And he drove me through a pretty dangerous environment. And we made it to a makeshift medical tent, not a hardened, secure location. And Aaron was stopped at the door, but they welcomed me in. And I spent time with 2 soldiers as they bled to death, about 30 minutes with each of them. was able to use the training that I benefited from at Brooke Army Medical Center, and took a knee, and as some medics and a doc tried to stop bleeding and tourniquet and help wounds that were clearly beyond medical science to save a person, I was able to kind of look first Carlos Wilcox in the eye and comfort him, tell him that we're proud of him, we love him, this isn't the end, share the hope I have that God is with him and he will be with him. I remember them calling the time of death and standing up, seeing the defeated look on the doctors' faces, and really felt God prompted through me, because this was much beyond my years as a 27-year-old captain, but really felt kind of the words coming out of my mouth, this isn't your fault, let's pray. And I prayed for the medical team, and then we pivoted, and I turned and I did the same thing with Dan Drevnick, who was succumbing to his wounds, but looked in better shape, and was able to tell him his parents loved him and we loved him, we're proud of him, this isn't the end. And in each young man's ear, I recited the 23rd Psalm, and I led him through the Lord's Prayer and tried to be a calm, pastoral voice of comfort, and obviously a painful end for both of those young men. I had known both of those individuals, even though we had a 1,300-person battalion. My roommate was the commander of the military police unit to which they both belonged, so I knew those soldiers more intimately than others. And I remember just recently fixing a DAP plate on the body armor of Dan Drevnick when I was praying for a group of people as they left for a convoy. And so it was very surreal to, having just joked with him a few weeks earlier or days earlier and fixed his DAP plate, now really being the last person that would speak to him. After we got him on a helicopter, he did pass en route. I prayed over the body of Wordish, a young man who was killed on impact in that rocket attack, and then spent almost 2 days up without sleeping, as there was a long line of people who were pretty severely affected by the loss of those two soldiers, and that is still a bit of a blur of a time. But that's definitely my most memorable experience. I still remember looking down and seeing not my blood, but their blood all over my uniform and my hands and my boots, and just the reality of war really coming home in that moment. There was another incident that probably stands out in a similar way, where an officer who was a colleague of mine was overwhelmed and took his own life with his sidearm, and left a note for his roommate to find. And I was showing a football game at Holy Joe's Coffee that I ran, and it happened to be the middle of the night to catch the game. And so I was the highest ranking officer that was awake in the area, and his roommate found me with this suicide note. And your heart drops thinking, I hope he didn't do that. And yet I woke up our Lieutenant Colonel Hansen, and another company commander, Captain Mark Graff, and among other officers. And anyways, we were sent to look to try to find this officer who we cared for and feared for, and I ended up finding his body. He had taken his life, and that was a very strange scene as the sun was rising, to find him, and just to pray for his parents, his family, and just to feel the weight not just of combat, but of really the cost of a warrior culture in general. Suicide's a real factor, and people don't just die from rocket and gunfire. They also die from despair and feeling so overwhelmed that they have what I like to call a heart attack of the mind. They make a permanent choice from a place that lacks reason. I fully believe Tad was his name, would not have made that choice if he would have understood the ramifications and the hurt that would cause. But I just will never forget that moment either. So chaplains have an incredible variety depending on their duty assignment, their rank, their branch, their season, their specialty. But what is constant about the chaplaincy, at least in my experience, was you're a person that's safe enough to show weakness to. And so people who are really hurting in a warrior culture will keep that hurt inside and kind of posture and make it seem like everything's fine when it's not. And the chaplain then becomes one person where they can kind of actually be okay with not being okay for a moment. And so that was a continual part of every day, I think, in every state, in every place, where there was at least one person you'd run into in a day where you could see there was a lot of pain, and they just wanted to be honest about that pain for a little brief moment. And that was a privilege to be a person who could at least sit in silence with that, sometimes offer wisdom into that, not often offer helpful answers, because a lot of times the pain is a result of a no-win situation like war and loss and trauma. But there's a tradition in the Jewish faith called sitting Shiva, and when somebody dies, rather than offering the right words, you acknowledge that words are not super helpful. And the only thing that's really helpful is your presence and your willingness to join them in their pain, and maybe food. And so to sit Shiva is for 7 days to show up and just be quiet and be sad with somebody who's sad, and maybe offer some food as well and eat with them. And a lot of the chaplaincy involves a form of sitting Shiva and just allowing people to be sad in your presence and sharing in that grief with them. I was very busy when I was deployed in combat zones, and so I honestly didn't have a whole lot of margin to talk to my family. There seemed to be a never-ending line of soldiers that wanted to talk to the chaplain, and in the hours that would have made sense for me to be calling home, that seemed to be when they wanted to talk. And so looking back, I feel like that was really probably hard on my family. For me, I was just really wrapped up in the busyness of it. So I did write a lot of letters, and I wrote enough letters to realize that there's actually a real significance to letter writing. And so then I started a program in Iraq, not started it, but implemented it, I guess, where it would help. It was called Letters to Home, and it was a program that helped encourage soldiers to write letters, because I think that's a lost art. And the hardest letter I wrote, or would help others start the process of writing, was a letter in case I don't come home. And that evolved into a video ministry where we would make some videos. And I've encouraged people, even not in the military, to do that as a discipline. And if you make a short video that tells your immediate family member how much you love them, and maybe say that, feel free to play this at my funeral or celebration of life, that will give you such a sharp sense of what your priorities are and what you're living for, and if you're doing right by the people you love. And so the fact that I didn't get to talk to my loved ones when I was separated, actually something beautiful came out of that.
Are there other aspects of your service you would like to share, such as accomplishments, challenges, or impacts on your family?
I don't think the military is for everybody, but I wish everybody would have some of the benefits of serving in the military. And I guess I don't mean the more obvious ones like discipline and physical fitness and leadership training. Those are all good things. But whatever your role, whatever your branch in the military, if you serve in harm's way in the military, it's almost impossible not to have a deep appreciation for people who are completely different than you, who, if you were on the civilian side of things, not only would you not enjoy hanging out with them, you would go out of your way to never hang out with them. And what combat does, and what the training that is harsh enough that prepares one for combat does, is it bonds people together across personality diversity, race, ideology, preferences, things like that. And so I found that the military for me gave me a deep, deep appreciation and sense of gratitude for people who are very, very different from me and who would honestly bother me and I would find obnoxious in any other setting. And I think that widened my appreciation for people in general of different backgrounds. So I'm really grateful for the military for that.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
I don't recall it vividly. It was in February of 2012. But I do have a picture that reminds me of it. It's a picture of me holding my son, who was an infant, my only son at the time, Clark, in my uniform. And that picture is in our house to this day. And it's special to me because it reminds me that the new mission after the military is not just my civilian vocation, but to be the type of father and the type of husband and servant leader of my family that would make my service in the military significant and meaningful and would bring meaning to it, even the sacrificial, hard, traumatic parts of it. And so that was a bittersweet day because I left the military not because I was done with it, but because I really wanted a family. And I knew the operational tempo and my role and position with my specific skill set was that I would continue to deploy at a rate where I would miss very large parts of the family I was trying to lead and raise. So it was a bittersweet decision for me. I had a few years where it was really difficult for me to figure out how to do life, not wearing the uniform. And if you knew me well or observed me, I don't know that you would have noticed that it was really difficult for me. A lot of that was going on internally. But I think just as much as we focus on post-traumatic stress, and that's a real thing, and that's certainly something that anybody who experiences enough trauma will have some of. I love the phrase, you don't go into a coal mine without getting some dust on you. And I had my share of dust because I had a significant amount of time in the depths of the coal mine. All that's true, but I also have learned in the many years since I got out, that was 2012, it's now 2024, that there's something called post-traumatic growth. And if you cooperate and graduate, as the infantry is fond of saying, a slogan, if you're open to change and self-awareness and growth and pursuing healing and integration and all of that, if you humble yourself to learn the right lessons that the military gave you and apply those in a new setting, you can experience what's called post-traumatic growth. And I think I'm the recipient of that as well, and I'm grateful for that. I remember in some infantry school, we were running in a column, and a drill sergeant was screaming at us. And I think it's a ranger school saying, mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. Or if you don't mind, it won't matter, something like that. And I remember pondering that as I was experiencing cardio fatigue, and everyone was kind of at the end of themselves. Is that true? If you choose to not focus on the pain, if you don't think it matters, it won't matter. And I think I lived as if that was true in my years in the military. In the years after the military, I struggled with some nightmares and a lot of sleepless nights as what some of the nightmarish things I saw kind of were quarantined in parts of my brain. And I chose not to think about those and avoid those. And it took me sitting down with a therapist to really confront some of those things, to realize that that phrase may have utility to motivate people to move past pain points and to do hard things. And that's necessary to train warriors. But it's not true in the truest sense. There are some forms of pain and loss and grief that you can't just use the power of positive thinking or strong-willed worldview to brush past. Just like if your leg was shot and your femur bone was crushed, you can be as positive as possible and you can be as tough and courageous and try to keep running, but eventually that bone will not support your body weight. And so I don't know that I ever really think of that phrase the same way mind over matter. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. Our mind is important, and our attitude matters significantly. And we have to take responsibility for the level of pain that we've gone through in life, whether that's been self-inflicted or just as a part of being in a combat zone, literally or metaphorically. And part of taking responsibility is focusing on what matters, and some of that self-care, and I think a lot of that is serving others and serving our Creator. But ironically, if we don't learn how to take care of ourselves and heal ourselves and access healing, we're not going to be very useful in serving others, serving our Creator. I resonate with the phrase, all gave some gave all. Being a casualty notification chaplain, helping active duty couples with their marriage problems, listening to the crises of individuals in combat zones or stateside or in training schools as a chaplain, leading people in worship and various strange places doing communion on the hood of a Humvee in 130 degrees, things like that, gave me a really front row seat to the human condition and how beautiful it is when we come together and we serve a greater purpose. But the fact is, the military was a blessing to me, even though it was a challenge, and it made me who I am today and made me a better leader, a better husband, a better father, a better citizen. And I'm eternally grateful for those like your son who gave everything. I've worked as a volunteer for Wounded Warrior and an alumni of that organization as well. I've served with the Yellow Ribbon. Teed Up for the Troops here in Minnesota has been important to me, and I've helped them raise funds. More recently, I've been helping with a startup veteran organization called Healing Heroes that is trying to build a fleet of wood fire saunas out of horse trailers, if you can believe it, to drop those saunas off in the driveways of wounded or discouraged veterans or active duty members, to give them the benefits of heat therapy, healing for mental health and for pain management, and to invite them out of isolation. So I've been building saunas with other volunteers, and that's been life-giving. There's no shortage of great organizations that help veterans. I like the phrase, do for one what you wish you could do for all. I don't know where that originated, but I think what happens is when we look at certain problems like the 22 plus per day suicides of veterans and active duty service members, we can rightly feel so overwhelmed that we think a lot about the problem, but we don't do anything actually to help the problem. And so our offering to the problem is something like anxiety, an offering of concern or anxious thought patterns. But I think as a person of faith, my advice would be to, if you believe there is a God who's personal and will guide us personally, just to say, God, I have a heart for veterans, and I have a heart for Gold Star families, and I have a heart for active duty personnel. Would you give me eyes to see one person that I could meaningfully serve in a small way? And then just open your eyes and do the next right thing. But I think when we start off small like that, it has a way of gaining momentum, as opposed to a mistake I see a lot of people make, where they try to solve the problem by starting such a large organization from scratch. They skip the wisdom of the infantry that says when standing up a war fighting machine, it's always crawl, walk, run, and so don't despise the small beginnings of helping one single veteran and being open to helping in whatever way would be most helpful to that one individual. Minnesota is a special state for warriors who retire or are discharged or medically retired or wounded off of active duty in any of the branches, because there is no active duty base in Minnesota that unites us, not a huge one like Fort Benning or Fort Jackson or Fort Knox. And so there's a lot of veterans living in isolation. The Minnesota National Guard has deployed more than its fair share, has deployed significantly more than a lot of active duty counterpart divisions. And so there's a lot of veterans in this state who I think are quietly suffering in isolation and who don't feel connected and don't feel like anybody else understands their pain. And so I think there's a lot of need and opportunity there. I also think Minnesotans have really stepped up in the last 15, 20 years and met that with the Beyond the Yellow Ribbon program and many other examples I've already talked about. But just like any significant endeavor, the temptation is to get tired of doing the right thing and feel like we've done enough for that and stop before the mission's complete. So I would just suggest to people, keep noticing the visible and invisible wounds of the veterans and the warrior families around you, and keep being open to doing for one what you wish you could do for all.
Stephen Andrew Kalina, the United States Marine Corps. I was a staff sergeant and a military policeman with the 1st, 2nd, and 4th Marine Divisions. I was in the Marine Corps from 2001 to 2011. I had a long history of family in the military, and so I always knew I wanted to serve my country. And when I started comparing different branches, I just realized that the Marine Corps seemed to be the toughest and most challenging. When I served and deployed, I left family behind. I was close with my family, so it was a tough transition being away from them for so long, and of course being away from friends and just different activities and hobbies that I had to put aside for a year at a time. I was a military policeman, but we were combat military police, so our duties usually around route reconnaissance and dealing with POWs and route securities. I think a lot of the most memorable times were overseas, and some good, some bad. One of the most memorable times was arriving in downtown Baghdad the day that the infantry arrived, and getting to see a lot of destruction and a lot of things that were things that you carry with you for the rest of your life, but things that you hope people don't have to experience and see. But then there were a lot of fun times where we got to do exciting things, got to explore markets in downtown Baghdad and go buy food and make meals with our unit, and just getting to know some of the local people and experiencing a different culture, getting to see things that are referenced in the Bible, and just getting to see them firsthand, and pretty special life experiences. I think after the initial invasion of Iraq, we were stationed in Kuwait and getting to work at a base that was doing customs. So we got to spend hours and hours a day helping other service members go home to their families. And it wasn't the most exciting duty to begin with, and not the most exciting base, just out in the middle of the desert. And then getting to see everyone else happy and going home. So that was a little tough for us. I wouldn't say I really had much of a typical day in the life, because I went from training to deployments to more training to reserves. So it was kind of changing. My duties were changing throughout my time in the service. So just depending on what I was doing. And overseas, it was a lot of sitting around and keeping yourself busy, and different missions that were different day to day. And then back in the U.S., just a lot of training, a lot of sitting. So there's a lot of downtime in the military. But then when it's time to go, you go. And so life was kind of ever changing, I guess. For me, being a person that's pretty confident and pretty independent, it was tough, initially going into the military, having someone tell you what you can and can't do, and deciding every factor of your day and every decision in your life. So that took some time to get used to, but I just kind of found ways to challenge myself and figure out ways to think for myself and kind of adapt to the military lifestyle, but yet be my own person and make my own decisions. I think one of the things that I think about a lot now as I'm a father is there's only so many things in life that someone can't take away. I mean, you can't guarantee that you'll keep the same job or your home. God forbid, God takes your children away. But being a service member is something I carry with me the rest of my life. No one can take that away from me. I'm a Marine till the day I die. I'm a father till the day I die, and so it's special. It's one of those things in life that you can be proud of, and no one can take away. because I phased out, kind of gradually through the reserves, it wasn't a major transition for me. I'd already kind of readapted to civilian life, but it was definitely a transition where I moved from something that was so meaningful and so important to me in life to then not having that be a part of my daily life. It was a challenge, and missing different, Marines that I'd spent a lot of time with, and missing that purpose in life. So I think for me, it was mainly, how do I find a different purpose? And conveniently, I got married right after I got out of the service and then started having kids. So definitely that purpose in life just kind of shifted. I definitely miss the camaraderie, being around other Marines and having people that understand what you're thinking and what you're experiencing and what drives you. I miss that routine, those challenges, the constant need to try and be better and challenge yourself. But at the same time, again, I made the decision to leave the service when I started having a family, because I didn't necessarily want to put them through deployment. So I'm okay with not the constant change and uprooting yourself and some of the monotony and the tedious activities sometimes that come with military lifestyle, a lot of downtime. So it's nice now being able to kind of control my own life and make my own decisions. But there are a lot of things I miss. Yeah, for me, coming from a family that had a long history of military, it was important for me to continue that service, to not only honor my father, my grandfathers, but also just serving my country and knowing that I did something for the greater good. And again, for the rest of my life, I can be proud that I served my country and did something that was more than just myself, and something that my kids can honor now too. The way I respected my father and grandfathers, now my kids get to see and understand that service to country and how important it is. I think it's important to separate the idea of support versus embracing. And I know for many years now, people have been much more supportive of the military, being willing to send care packages or go to an event. But I think most importantly, we need to have a better understanding of what it means to serve and the importance of it. And I think parents who are willing to support the military, but yet not quite willing, or people are much more willing to support the military, but yet there's still a hesitation to embrace the idea of service, and especially for parents who may be supportive of the idea of the military, but not quite ready to send their son or daughter off into harm's way. And I know that's a tough decision, but at the same time, I think it's important for all Americans to understand that we all are indebted to the country and to our fellow service members to make sure that we're a part of the. Sorry, I'm just struggling to find my words here. Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand the importance of serving our country, and that, as parents, we want the best for our children. And for many, that's, they're willing to support the military, but yet not necessarily willing to encourage their son or daughter to join the service. And I think it's important that we put a strong value on the military, no different than going to a 4-year university or buying a house or starting a family, that as a parent, we need to be more supportive of the military service and encouraging our kids to serve their country.
Sergeant Derek Lee Goodridge. I was in the United States Marine Corps in 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines out in Pendleton, California. I joined in August 2006 and medically retired July of 2012. So one day I was sitting in the high school cafeteria. We always had all the branches coming in, and one day the Marine Corps walked in their fancy dress blues, and I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. Didn't even talk to my parents about it, nothing. Started working with the recruiter. So I was the first one in my family to actually join any branch. So I wanted to set that new pathway for our younger generation to follow in my family. And I made it in, and then shortly after I got in, some of my other little or younger cousins were, oh, I want to follow that. I want to do that. And then some of them joined the Army, some of them joined the Air Force. And now my family, or my kids, As of right now, my oldest is looking at the Air Force, and then my 2 girls are, I want to be in the military. I want to be in, but obviously their pathways change in a million times from the time they're young all the way up to actually becoming senior. So
Sounds like you'd be proud of it if they did.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What I left behind was a young, immature man. And then throughout the military, I've matured, became the adult and person that I am today. A lot of things have changed from when I first went into now, all the way from like the littler stuff to jokes that I would think were funny back then are really immature these days. But the difference from when I went into now is that maturity level. Just the way that a person grows and learns and adapts. And then especially after injury, you got to adapt to every situation. And previously, I would have got so frustrated and gave up on a lot of stuff. And then throughout the years of learning to adapt and overcome, like that's one of the big things in the Marine Corps is adapt and overcome to every situation. Well, once you get hurt, that literally is put into perspective on every single thing throughout the day. The one experience that I can come up with that is the most memorable is the day that I got hurt. It was an IED blast that somebody else had stepped on. We were out on a basic patrol that morning. It was cold. I know that. Very cold. Because I had layers on and we weren't supposed to, and I did. But it was a IED blast. Somebody stepped on it, and we found our initial IED, pulled back, waited for EOD to come up, and then as we were holding security, somebody else had stepped on a secondary, and many surgeries later, here I am today. The only thing that I can actively remember from that day was just the stuff that I've seen off of a video. But
So it's actually video footage running at the time it happened?
Mm-hmm. Somebody had a helmet cam.
Huh.
So they got the initial blast on the camera, and then the camera cuts out and then comes back on to me. So I've watched that video many times trying to analyze them, things that we could have done differently that day, things to why did it happen, how did it exactly happen, but just watching the video through, so the one that had the camera on was facing away from everything, and then you can hear the blast, you can see all the blast, and then like I said, it cuts out, so you can't really analyze anything on like a training aspect, but you can analyze training events medically afterwards. And the guy that actually, our corpsman that saved me that day, I don't think he could have done anything different. Like, obviously I'm still here, still alive. I wish I had an arm, but I'd rather be missing that and be alive than have it and being dead. I'd have to say my favorite duty station when I was forward deployed to Bahrain. That was we didn't really have to do anything because it was a naval base, and so all the Navy MPs or the Navy MPs took care of everything unless there was a more serious situation, then we would cover their post. I think there was only I think we were out there for about 7 months, and I think we only stood post probably 2 times out there, and so the rest of the time was getting a bunch of dumb Marines together and doing whatever we can to stay out of trouble. That was a fun deployment. It was probably, I've been to many different places, but Bahrain would have been the one that would kept me in. That one is being away from family. That's the biggest part about like anybody joining is you're this young kid. Oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and then you actively join the military and you learn the aspects of being away from family. It's hard. Like, I'm a big mama's boy, and when I was over in Afghanistan, obviously we didn't have phones, we didn't have internet, like nothing. So it was back to the basic handwriting, and not having that communication was tough. But again, you learn to adapt and overcome to that situation, and you lean on your brothers and sisters that are out there with you. And then, like, kids, like, you miss your kids. I had, at the time, just my one son, and God, it was hard being away from him. It was hard re-enlisting because of that situation, but you want to do good by everybody in your family, so you stay on this one path that you want to have as a career and then just not have a lifestyle with your family I think that's the most difficult part, or it was for me. Yeah, so impacts on my family. Not only did it change myself, but it changed like even my parents for the better. Like, before I joined the military, they had no idea about Gold Star parents, Blue Star families, Silver Stars, none of that. But once I joined, they started joining. So one of the big ones around in Minnesota is Tee It Up for the Troops, Tribute to the Troops. They started riding with Tribute to the Troops. So not only did joining the military affect me, but it also affected them for a greater causes as well. And it opened their eyes up to many different situations that everybody circulated in the military is brought into. So it affected them by meeting all these other great people and families, and so it benefits everybody. My life drastically changed. Obviously, it was a normal body going into the military, and then afterwards, I'm a single amputee with many surgeries under my belt because of the IED, and learning to live the amputee life with two semi-decent legs, and you're missing your dominant arm. You learn very quickly on, man, maybe I can't do that, or maybe I shouldn't do that, or, you know what, I'm gonna force myself to learn how to do that and keep that positivity going. And if I keep myself going and finding different things and challenging myself, it opens my kids' eyes and my parents' eyes and friends' eyes to, like, okay, no matter the situation, yes, you may get knocked down, but you get right the fuck back up. Excuse my language. But you can't let anything stop you. So, yeah, the one thing that I miss is that camaraderie between that brotherhood. That'll never be the same. I won't ever get it the same. No matter how many different jobs I work, I won't have that same camaraderie with the guys that I was in the military with. Like, I know they had my back 24/7, no matter the situation. I can look at a guy that I currently work with and be like, I don't trust you to watch my six to save anybody else's lives. So, yeah, the camaraderie is that big one that everybody would miss. And then the things that I'm glad I left behind, I'm not going to say on audio, but I'm glad I left behind all the drinking and the fighting and that immaturity stuff. What it meant to serve for me was I wanted that, like I said, to carve out that new path style or lifestyle for my younger generation. So growing up, my whole dad's side of the family was drugs, alcohol, gang violence, like all of that stuff. I didn't want any part of it. I didn't want my kids to be around it, none of that. So growing up, my mom did amazing with us to keep us out of that lifestyle. But obviously, it's still lurking in the background with everything else. And I barely managed to graduate high school because of my dad's side of the family and all of that. But I wanted to carve out that new lifestyle for me, my cousins, everybody else. And I wanted to show my brothers and sisters, like, hey, no matter that past situation, we can better ourselves for not only ourselves, but our younger generation, our kids, their kids. So it was one of those times where it was just like, I need to do something different. Being wounded, I have access to many different veterans organizations. Some of the local ones that I associate with is Teed Up for the Troops, Tribute to the Troops, Minnesota's Outdoor Adventure Foundation. But like some of the bigger ones that are more nationally, I know Teed Up for the Troops is a national organization, but Semper Fi Fund, they've helped me tremendously. Like, I get stuck in certain situations where I'm having car issues. I can reach out to them and be like, hey, this is the situation, this is my financial situation, anything you like. We were on our way out to California. Me and my fiance were, she was pregnant at the time when we decided to drive out there. Miserable idea. Miserable. But we drove out there, and about 3/4 of the way through, we started having transmission issues. And we were on our way out there for one of our reunions for our deployment. And we ended up making it out there. Semper Fi Fund paid for a new transmission for us, paid for a rental car while we were out there. And then right at the end of the vacation, we picked up our car and managed to drive home just fine. So like stuff like that, like different smaller situations. They send me a new Christmas ornament every single year. Like, even though I barely talk to them, I still get that one Christmas ornament that even my mom looks forward to seeing a picture of. Hey, she'll call me, hey, did you get your Christmas ornament yet? Oh, not yet. You'll be the first to know when I do. Reach out and talk to somebody. You might not know the person to contact, but somebody else might. Doesn't hurt to just talk. Ask questions. Find the local VFW. They know a bunch of different military organizations. Talk to somebody in there, or find a veteran. Everybody knows somebody to talk to about different organizations and stuff like that.
John Trost. My branch of service was Minnesota Army National Guard. I retired as a Major General, 2-star, and served within many jobs within the 34th Infantry Division. You know, it's pretty interesting. Way back in the fall of 1969, the draft had turned into an all-volunteer army, and so you were given a number called, within the lottery system. I was number 21, and so my reaction was I decided I would call home and have my dad go up to the local National Guard Armory and put my name on the list to join the Minnesota Army National Guard, and whichever called me first, if I got the letter from the Army or from the local draft board, or was notified by the Minnesota Army National Guard I could enlist there, that's where I would go. I ended up in the Minnesota Army National Guard for 41 years after that. Well, I was never deployed to a theater of war. However, went to many of the different schools that one has to go throughout your career, and Many other times I was doing special projects. I would leave home for 2-3 weeks at a time. So I missed, over the course of a 41-year career, I missed many of the different events that one's family does over time. So most of it is you miss many of the different family meaningful dates throughout the course of your career, and that happens to every soldier. My most vivid memories are conducting tests for different artillery battalions. I authored 7 tests over the course of my career, and high visibility, high stress, shooting cannonballs all hours of the day and night, and grading organizations and culminating with a report to a force comm on part of the active Army. So it was a very rewarding experience, but a lot of energy, time, and effort went into designing and accomplishing that the test. Well, there's many, but I guess the most memorable experience is seeing soldiers from within your organization experience success and move up the ladder to get into other jobs. And the military is, whether you realize it or not, is really a people business. You have to get a mission accomplished, but at the same time, you got to take care of your people. And if you don't do both at the same time, you end up with nothing. So you have to do both. That's interesting. I didn't have a problem. I just, the hardest part when you're a reserve component in National Guard is when you are scheduled for training that is always on the weekend or at some point in time when you would have conflict with, I need to be doing this other thing at the same time, and military wins. And you get used to it. You just say, well, that's the way it is. So there was many times I'd have loved to have been doing something else, but mission at the end of the day is number one, so we would leave and go do that. The military is challenging, but is also very rewarding. I was very fortunate with a 41-year career, retiring as a 2-star. But there's a reason we were able to accomplish that, and one of them is much the same as it is in the civilian career. You have to stay current. You have to maintain educational requirements, and those that are prepared and those that are ready will get the nod. And if you're not willing to invest in your career, whether it be military or civilian, if you're not willing to invest, it's going to be a challenge for you in life. So you have to invest in your career or job or profession, whatever it is. I guess the service had a really good impact on my life. It taught me that you have to stay current, you have to maintain, you have to continually put your best foot forward, and that being as a reserve component guy, a National Guard guy, I also figured that out, that you had to do that in Monday through Friday as well as Saturday and Sunday. And so I think that really helped me in my civilian endeavors also. So, you got to put your best foot forward every day, and people notice that, and you really have to do that. I don't miss the work that the service brought every day. I miss the people. And like I said earlier, the military is a people business, and if those that can manage people, get along with people, and get the best out of people will be successful in the military also. And it's really about the people, taking care of the people, and enjoying their success as well, and then you'll do just fine. When I joined the military, we were in the Vietnam era, And as I grew and proceeded in my military career, when we started deploying organizations, it was pretty evident that we had not done a good job as a nation when we returned soldiers from Vietnam. And that experience and that sight picture allowed me to really help us, the Minnesota National Guard. How do we return soldiers from a deployment back to civilian life? The Beyond the Yellow Ribbon program has got some fingerprints of ours in that, and although not the main person that we were able to affect that, and that was really, really a good thing to be a part of, an important thing to be a part of, in a project that is really well done, still being used today. So pretty proud of how our organization, Minnesota Army National Guard, brings soldiers back from a deployment and reintegrates them back into civilian jobs, professions, careers, and civilian life. Yeah, we were part of, helping General Larry Shellito bring that program to fruition. Has been a great organization and a great tool to bring soldiers back into civilian endeavors. We've helped many organizations, been a part of the Minnesota Military Family Foundation for 19 years. That one was a fun one to be a part of because we were making a difference. And that's the one I spent most of my time, energy, and effort with, and very proud of what the Minnesota Military Family Foundation has accomplished since its inception in 2004. It's pretty easy to show support for the military, and it really can be very simple. If you see somebody that's or know somebody that has been in the military, it's just a simple thank you is pretty easy to do. Doesn't cost you anything other than a little bit of your time, and it is a reward that most people don't understand. So simple thank you is really means a ton to those that have served.